another great panel on inclusivity. We're going to structure this one slightly different than the other panels. We're going to pull it into a little bit of a conversation at the end where we can all have a conversation with the panelists together and have ideas move between and through them. But just some motifs I noticed reading the abstracts and thinking about it, things I'm really excited about seeing being articulated between the different presenters, is this sort of idea that inclusion is something that happens both between the mechanics of the game and the community behind the game. And that interaction between the mechanical and community spaces are two things that I'm really hoping to see get articulated in this panel. So I'm super duper excited to see this, and I'm just gonna not steal any more time and let you guys jump into it.
Hi everybody, thank you for coming this morning. I'm Iris Bull.
And I'm Lucas Kempe-Cook.
And today we're going to be presenting a project that is actually in collaboration with the Fund Board and Historian, who couldn't be here today because travel's hard, but also because I think that this is the third or fourth iteration of the talk that we've given, so hopefully we can kind of streamline it a little bit for you. And just to, just use the, there we go. Just to give you some context for the project and where it came out of.
My advisor sent me an email in January of this year, and it contained this Washington Post article. At the time, I read the headline and I read the first sentence and realized that I hated this article. I hated the way it talked about toxicity, and I hated the way that it talked about esports. So I then talked with Jay and Iris and Tristan, and we started a conversation that has ended in this paper.
Yeah, we were getting together on Fridays and basically going over some of the different field sites, some of the things that differentiate us as researchers, but also like bring us together over the topic of toxicity, because toxicity looks different in any given place that you're doing field work. If you're doing studies in virtual spaces, I know you know this. So Tristan's doing work in understanding how game design choices around farming in World of Warcraft have changed over time to eliminate certain forms of toxicity that are just no longer there. And then Javon and I play on an esports team, and occasionally we do performances live with the other team, so we're playing in a co-present space, and we had a really toxic match, and so he writes about that in the paper. My contribution is actually more reflective of just playing by myself or with my team, but by myself at home over the network in Overwatch. And so I'm going to share some of my experiences playing Overwatch for about 600 hours.
And I bring in another game entirely, Dota 2, and I bring in my 2,700 hours of play. Oh god, that's a terrifying number.
Yeah. And to basically sum our research question, the question that we kept coming back to in our conversations, why are we all dissatisfied with the standard accounts of what toxicity is, how it operates, and why it's bad at the end of the day? Why are we as qualitative researchers skeptical of linguistic, data-driven, and machine learning approaches to fighting toxicity? What does it mean to fight toxicity? This is something that we're all kind of problematizing in our work. And so to answer that question again, those are our four field sites, and we're using autoethnographic methods for this paper because we find that participant observation field notes, recorded games, and third-party websites that are tracking the game data actually provide us with the tools that we need to come to the kind of conclusion that we're going to share in the paper. One of the funny things about this project is that it didn't begin with a shared definition of toxicity. This is something that we have kind of developed over time, and we've kind of realized that our reaction to that initial Washington Post article is kind of informed by this common practice in conversations around toxicity that it's taken as a synonym for cyberbullying. But in our lived experiences in the game, cyberbullying doesn't fully explain what we're talking about when we use the word toxicity. And instead, we suggest that toxicity goes beyond those moments of verifiable harassment, that there's some kind of underlying atmosphere that operates as a culture of othering and dehumanizing those that deviate from some perceived norm, right? And that's some norm that's guided by our experiences in the real world, our meat-space bodies, but also in the game.
Do you want to skip that one for time?
Well, I think that because of where we're at in this conference, one of the things that it might be helpful for you as a researcher, if you're not really sure where our framework is kind of coming from, we're using Alana Gershon's theorization of media ideologies to kind of get at what are these beliefs that people have about appropriate codes of conduct that informs their expressions of toxicity and their identification of toxicity, because this is an interpersonal relationship that we have, not just with the game, but with other players, right?
And I do want to note before I go on, I pull examples of toxic chat from the game. I do not sugarcoat it. I do not censor anything except player names. So be warned that I am not sugarcoating this, and that's very intentional. Because in my experience, it's not sugarcoated for me.
As a consequence, right, of adopting this framework, we find that toxicity is actually very mundane and everyday. Despite what things, I mean, like when we talk about toxicity in academic communities, we usually use things like Gamergate or the Fappening to highlight some kind of intensity around toxicity. That toxicity is exceptional. It's something that can be eliminated. It's like a weed, and it's so prevalent in our everyday experiences of what gaming is like and what it means to be a gamer and relate to other gamers, that we're not convinced that it really operates that way. And we also have to acknowledge that as gamers ourselves, we can be toxic. We may not be hurling racial epithets and being aggressive in that way, but when someone's asserting their white supremacy in a chat, I'm gonna be an asshole to that person. I'm going to check that behavior. I'm going to be toxic to a racist, right? That's what toxicity is too. Right? It's not just about a particular identity politic. That's not sufficient. Okay, so my TLDR. So I'm going to walk you guys through an example of how this kind of operates in Overwatch. And again, I've kind of already talked about where my research is coming. If you've never played Overwatch, the image here on the screen this is a first-person shooter game. It's cooperative, so you're playing in teams of 6, 4, or 3. And the goal of the game is to accomplish some kind of objective, to push a payload. And you need, a lot of the time, to talk to people in order to accomplish that goal. And you need to make strategic choices in your hero selection to accomplish that goal. And in the game, actually the Washington Post article was about this game in particular. In Overwatch, it's not abundantly clear when people are reporting toxic behavior, why they're reporting it, to what effect, but there is this pattern of reporting certain kinds of players at higher tiers of play that has everything to do with their hero selection and not necessarily their race, class, or gender, perceived race, class, or gender. So this has kind of been one of my research questions: is how do people decide when to actually report? And I'm going to give you an example of XQC, one of the most prolific.
Nasty Skin 94, welcome to the jungle 3 months, 2 months on. Thanks for the high personal membership, man. Isolated free winning. Yeah, like 3 widow mains, literally.
3 widow mains. So if you can't see that very well, he's decided that this player is a Symmetra main, and he's just going to report this player over and over again. And what he's typing into the chat is fuck you, fuck you, fuck you, fuck you. Because I guess he believes that the person, the Symmetra player, is going to get these messages somehow. He doesn't believe that who he's actually saying fuck you to are the content moderators on the platform. That's not apparent to him as a player.
For the most part, this judge person is like Ultra Megas in one trail, so good luck with that.
Oh, fucking yeah, my favorite. Nasty CM94.
So I bring this up because this is a great example of how the platform itself creates a new or novel vector for evaluating both moral character and like skill proficiency. So the poster presentation I gave yesterday talked about the evaluation of soft skills. That's part of this, but it operates as a vector for marginalizing people on the basis of their identity in the game. I say this as someone with over 147 hours on Mercy. For people who play Overwatch, you know what that means. that means that I get harassed in a very particular way, right? And the game helps, or it enables a certain lens or optic for viewing my player proficiency or competency, because it doesn't do, like, the statistics and the graphical representations of what I'm capable of, quite frankly, they suck, right? They tell everybody, what you need to know are a bunch of numbers that are homogeneous, thank you. And here are some pretty graphs that represent, well, you know, it's a bar graph. We all know how to read a bar graph. More is better, or more means more, right? Finally, the use of the reporting system. Right, okay, so then when people are trying to report, they rely on these graphical models to kind of help in their quick evaluation, because when you're at the beginning of a game, you have a very limited amount of time to evaluate who you're playing, how do you operationalize a strategy and work with 6 strangers. The reporting system itself, it operates on existing beliefs about the role of soft skills in evaluating someone's positionality in the community. So when people are using the reporting system, they may be reporting someone for saying conventionally, I guess we can call them toxic things, like you're a jerk, which is why I was reporting someone in this instance. Or they can be used to evaluate other kinds of things, like, do you know who the right characters are to play? Do you know the meta? Are you playing the meta? If you're not playing the meta, you're not doing work for me, and that's toxic, right? An algorithm is not, like a machine learning algorithm is not necessarily going to pick that up in evaluating whether or not the Symmetra player, or in this case XQC, was being toxic. The reason XQC eventually becomes banned for doing this kind of behavior is because it becomes publicized on Twitch. So I know that. Thank you.
So moving on to my field site, Dota 2. Real quick, 5 versus 5 team game, 115 plus heroes. Each hero has 3 spells and an ultimate, typically. And 800,000 unique people have played in the last 30 days. I've been a Dota 2 player for over 4 years. I have over 2,700 hours in the game and roughly 1,800 matches. If you want to look me up and like verify my stats, here's my profile. You can do that. That's fine with me. So when my advisor sent me that Washington Post article, I wrote her back. And I said, what this article describes is well in line with my lived experience every single day. I have quit the game for periods of time because it has been so unpleasant to play a game. So this is something that I have felt and experienced myself, and I try to mitigate that by finding people to play with that I know and I trust. So one thing that I did was I took a sample of 20 games from February and March of this year. They were just the most recent 20 games I had played. There was nothing particularly special about them. I didn't know that I was going to be sampling these when I was playing them. I just took a sample, and all I looked at was the public all chat. This does not include the intra-team chat between me and my allies. It does not count the voice chat. It does not count any third-party services like Discord. This is just what people took the time to type in all chat. So there are things that are missing. So in both of these examples, my team is losing. Over here, this is how long into the game these messages are sent. So they happen over a long period of time. As my team is losing, you can see a couple of players trying to figure out why we're losing. You know, Medusa has no farm. Medusa has no farm. Look, Medusa is literally tickling everyone instead of damaging them. And then the response is, well, you didn't do your job. You're literally autistic. And this is something that happens over and over again. It's this ableist language where they are placing someone into a category regardless of if that person belongs there or not. So example 1, example 2 is 2 parts. And you'll see it gets more extreme as the game goes on and as we lose more and more. One thing that I found very odd when I started playing Dota was that there is a particular racism on USC servers against Peruvians. Thank you. And anyone who speaks Spanish is automatically Peruvian. I can go into the reasons why this is at another time. There are technological reasons for this. But as we start losing more and more and more and more and more, it ends with, fuck you fucking Peruvian queers. It doesn't matter what else happened in the game. While we were losing, that's how it ended. This also doesn't account for the fact that another player was screaming over voice chat at me. Screaming and swearing at me the entire game. So just some examples here. So one of these common themes is being placed in these marginalized communities, whether your membership there is warranted or not, or is true or not, whatever true means. So, yeah, and we demonstrate toxic behaviors and practices, it affects those who do identify. Because as a queer player, when I see my teammates yelling at the other team for being queers, that's terrifying. That is actually terrifying to me, and it impacts my play and my experience with the game. And what we came to the conclusion of, toxicity is mundane. In that sample of 20 games, I had 18 where there were clear examples of toxic chat. I can't think of a single game where it hasn't happened. Through all chat, through voice chat, through whatever. It is mundane. And it impacts people from the moment they log in to the moment they log out. You know, it is not something big and extreme and these large events that we think of. It happens all the time.
Yeah, it's not always a targeted harassment campaign, right? It's just someone expressing themselves, and in particular, right, they're.
Yeah, we gotta wrap up, sorry. And it's context dependence. This is the last point I'm gonna make. Sometimes well played means well played. You did a good job, you just won us the game, you got the gank on the mid laner. Sometimes well played means fuck you, asshole. You just dove that tier 1 tower and died and fed the enemy. And part of our skepticism is that these systems can't account for that. Can't account for that difference between when well played means good job and when well played means fuck you. So.
We'll end there.
Yep.